Hello and welcome back to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup, where we bring you all of the latest news from the royal world. We are, of course, joined by Daily Express's royal correspondent, Richard Palmer. Richard, hello.
Hello, hi.
Lots going on this week with the launch of a new campaign from the Princess of Wales, and the Prince and Princess of Wales went to a food bank, which we'll be talking about shortly, as they did face a bit of criticism for that. But of course, you were to point out, rightly so, Richard, that politicians have gone there and other various members of society. But we've obviously got some of your clips and pictures from the food bank. But of course, there is lots of topics to go over today. So if you have any comments or questions on any of the topics that we speak about, then just put them in the comment section and then we can get them answered for you from the expert, Richard. Now, Richard, we're going to kick things off then about the food bank. You were there, so tell us why they were there then.
Well, actually, I wasn't there. I think it was a colleague who was there. We have this system of the Royal Rota where essentially one pool reporter covers for everybody. So I can't remember who it was who was actually there.
I thought you were there, Richard, because I saw the pictures and the video on Twitter.
No, I don't want to get pulled up by one of my colleagues for giving a misleading impression. It's the great value of our rota system is that we are able to cover lots of different engagements and share pool information, so that we're all able to give decent coverage of these events.
Yeah.
So no, I was actually in Windsor for another event that the Princess of Wales did, but not that food bank. I have covered visits to food banks. In fact, one of the visits I did cover was Prince Harry visiting a food bank, I think in Nottingham, if I remember rightly. And I was interested because there was a really big reaction on social media to William and Kate visiting a food bank, and people are entitled to their opinions. Members of the royal family should expect scrutiny from the press and public. So I was just interested in the reaction, and I have to say my impression was that there was a certain amount of a pile-on there. How much of it was coordinated, how much of it was just people reacting in the same way, I can't say. I suspect there was a bit of a coordinated attack on William and Kate, particularly on Twitter, from a number of different groups. I mean, one group are people who are sort of ardent supporters of Harry and Meghan and feel that Harry and Meghan have been wronged by the rest of the royal family. And another group is, I think, British Republicans, people who want to abolish the monarchy. And then there were the various other people. But it does raise questions. All of these things raise questions. You've got a couple who are fabulously wealthy by most people's standards, perhaps not as wealthy as some people think, going to visit a food bank. They didn't turn up with any gifts, as far as we know. It's more usual for members of the royal family to turn up with gifts for a food bank, because whatever they turn up with, it'll always be criticised as being a token amount by their critics. So in that sense, they can't win, I suppose. Obviously, some people made the point that if they didn't have all their different palaces and royal residences, if we didn't spend several £100 million a year, probably about £350 million a year, on having a royal family, then more could be done to address the problem. On the other hand, you can use that argument for just about anything, and I suppose we can come to that a bit on Kate's early years campaign as well. Yeah. But I think it's fair to say that a royal visit like this is designed to, thank volunteers and staff who are helping some of the most vulnerable people in our society, and B, to highlight the issue. And members of the royal family have to be very careful about getting involved in party politics. So, it's a bit difficult for them to criticise the politicians. But it's that those very same politicians from governing parties and other parties who have the wherewithal, who have the ability to change policies and make the changes that would mean that food banks aren't needed. What we've seen, not only in the UK but around the world, is an exponential rise in food banks in Western society, and that's a much bigger political issue. But obviously, it's one that a royal visit highlights. So I was trying to engage with people on social media because I think, whether I agreed with them or not, and I wasn't really trying to defend or condemn. I was trying to encourage a debate because I think it's important for that this issue gets all the exposure.
Yeah. It's definitely been highlighted, but you do make the good point that this is like a fabulously wealthy couple. Do you think they read the room right then by turning up, as far as we know, empty-handed?
Well, I think that was possibly a mistake. We don't know. They don't always tell us what else has gone on. They might have made some donation behind the scenes that they just didn't want to boast about. And what they did say as they were leaving was, well, William said, we'd like to come back when all this lot, the media aren't around to help out. So, I think people should bear that in mind as well. But it was interesting because, I get a lot of feedback, shall I say, from Scottish nationalists, SNP supporters. And Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister in Scotland, has been to food banks. She's also, her party has been in power for 15 years in Scotland, and yet there's been a big rise in the number of food banks, or in the number of children, particularly being fed from food banks. So I just found it slightly incongruous that Scottish nationalists were attacking Prince William and Princess Kate for doing something that their political party has been responsible for, some might say.
Oh, right. And it's an interesting point as well that you make about the Sussexes. Now, this is the Sussex camp, obviously not the Sussexes, but the fan accounts of the Sussexes, very much criticising this. But you said Prince Harry also did a food bank visit. Now, I
think they've been to a food bank of sorts in the US as well, at least one, if not more. And they have made donations as well, Harry and Meghan.
So from your perspective, it doesn't matter what either one of these couples do. The fan accounts of them will criticise them no matter what they do.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, we took this to a poll because we wanted to see what you guys thought about this at home. If we can pull it up, do you think the Prince and Princess of Wales's visit to a food bank was a good decision? Yes, 75%. No, 25%. So there we go, Richard. That's what you guys think about it. But of course, if you've got any comments that you want to leave here, then we can pull them up accordingly. But we're going to go on to a big campaign, a big push on the early years campaign now from the Princess of Wales. We know that she's done lots of work in this area over the past few years, Richard. But it's been a massive push this week for a new launch, as it were.
Yes, it has been. And again, a very mixed reaction on social media. People saying she's been doing this for 10 years, which she has, trying to highlight it. And yet, by her own admission, public awareness is really very low of the real direct links between what happens to all of us in our first 5 years and how we are as adults, what happens in our adult lives. Um, and so, and the other thing I'm always interested in is she's been talking about this for a long time now, and at various times, when we went to Copenhagen to cover her on a trip to Denmark to find out how the Danes deal with the early years, and when we were over there, we were briefed that she hoped to influence the government, the British government, and policymakers, but whenever you poke that a little bit further, that question, there's often a temptation on the part of senior royal aides to sort of recoil and sort of say, oh, she's not getting involved in politics. She's just trying to raise the public awareness. But there is an admission that if the public become more aware of how things need to change in the way we bring up children in our country, then that will inevitably percolate down to or up to the politicians. Not sure you percolate up, but it will. There will be pressure brought to bear on the policymakers to devote more resources to this sometimes rather neglected part of our.
Do you think then that's sort of playing a bit close to fire, as it were? Is it slightly dangerous?
It is, but I think it's. It reflects the monarchy of King Charles III. I think it reflects the approach that they've taken for some time. William and Kate, but also Harry when he was a working member of the family, and Meghan when on the short time she was, but also other members of the royal family. They're all trying to influence public debate about these key issues, and the king and queen consort as well. And it's less of a ribbon cutting monarchy and more of a campaigning monarchy, I would say. Although we're in the early stages of this reign.
Lots of people would say, this is very easy to come from somebody who has a full-time nanny, and they go to independent school, and they have everything they need at their fingertips. They don't have to worry about any food bills. They don't have to worry about anything like that in terms of day-to-day care of children. That's what she may be facing in terms of criticism for this campaign.
Yes, and also they have the luxury of being able to take large amounts of time off with their children in the school holidays, etc. That other people don't have that luxury.
Right.
Now, one of the key messages coming out of this from her foundation, from the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood that she's created, is that inequality is one of the big problems. And I've pointed out to them, questioned them about that before, because I just think that's a really difficult sell to say we need to deal with inequality, reduce inequality in the UK, when you are somebody whose husband and firstborn child were designated as future heads of state before, even before they were born. Really, once we knew they were on their way, this is going to be a future king. And what they've said is, well, they didn't really answer that question, other than saying she wants to use her platform to help encourage this debate and to reduce inequality. I have to say that inequality in terms of wealth is a big issue here, but it's not the only issue, because you can have a very nice house, a very nice car, a prestigious job that earns you lots of money, but also you can be so busy that you and your partner don't actually spend much time with your children in the first 5 years of their lives.
No.
You don't give them the sort of nurturing that she's talking about to turn them into well-adjusted, well-rounded adults later in life. So it is, and I'm fascinated by this subject. I mean, I asked one of the scientists, can you go into a bit more detail about what are the links? Because they say that they can study a child at, say, 3 years old and predict what illnesses that child will have in adulthood, how happy, confident, successful that child might be. And it's important to say that if things go wrong at that stage, then there are ways of correcting things later on. But I found this fascinating. And the particular scientist said, well, I think everybody knows about the marshmallow test. And I'd never heard of it.
No.
So this is a test that was done, I think, in about 1972, started. And they followed, they gave children the option of you can have one marshmallow now, or if you wait 20 minutes, you can have 2 marshmallows in 20 minutes. And they followed those children over 40 years, and they found that the children who were able to, as they put it, regulate their emotions, who were able to say, no, I'll control myself, I'll wait for the greater reward in 20 minutes, were far more successful, and I think happier in adult life. I'd never heard of that, and I think that just shows that I think people who studied psychology will have heard of it's called delayed gratification. People who've studied psychology will have heard of it, and maybe who work in specialised in the early years. But I just think a lot of us, including people like me who've got a couple of children, it's just a completely new concept to me.
Yeah, no, it's a completely new concept for me. Learn something new every day or every week.
So the idea of a campaign is that, we all, when we're parents, we all sort of pay attention to, is my baby the right weight for their age, the right height? Are they talking at the right stage? Are they walking at the right stage? But less attention is paid to how do they interact? Are they getting cuddles all the time? How do they interact with other members of the family? Are other people giving them the love and attention that they crave? And how are their emotions that developing? Is their emotional development happening at the same rate that those other things are happening? So that's what she's trying to focus on.
And also interesting because from like a PR perspective, she hosted an event a couple of evenings ago and invited various people to come. And amongst those people were influencers, Zara McDermott, for instance, who used to be, I think she did a stint on Made in Chelsea. People
certainly Love Island, yes.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily get on the guest list if it was 10 years ago. So it's kind of showing a shift, I think, in terms of that. But Richard, to kind of bring it back from a royal fan perspective, she's obviously loves children. Do you think that they'll have another one?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I mean, I think you've asked me this before, and I've heard her say to people, I think William would kill me if I did.
Okay, fine, all right then. Well, but if she's pregnant again, Richard, I'm going to clip this up and play it.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time I've been wrong.
Okay, well, more news today from Australia. I think we've got a picture of an old note which has the late Queen's face on. Some people might expect with a new monarch that they'd be getting King Charles's face on it, but that is not the case, is it, Richard? Which prompts the question, obviously, changing relationships overseas with the monarchy.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, it's probably not a coincidence. I mean, it's the central bank that's done it, but obviously the Prime Minister of Australia has made it clear that he would ultimately like to move to a republic. Although, on the other hand, he has also made it clear that it's not a priority for him in his first term in office. So I don't think Australians are expecting there to be another referendum on the issue of whether they should get rid of the monarchy. Yeah, it is. Is it interesting? I mean, an AP, the Associated Press, reported it as getting rid of the British monarchy from its banknotes, but of course it's Australia's monarchy as well. So Australia getting rid of its monarchy on the banknotes was quite a decent big story, I think. I mean, I think the King will still be on the coins, so he's not being whitewashed completely from Australian money. But
it's a move, though. It's a slow transition.
Yes, possibly. I mean, I don't think. I mean, obviously, in this country, we have the monarch on the banknotes. I'm not sure all countries do. A colleague, Patricia Treble in Canada, was saying no decision's been made in Canada yet, and I think there's often a couple of years between before new notes appear. US, I think I'm right in saying the US doesn't have the president on its banknotes. So, but of course the president changes much more frequently than our monarch.
This is true. But I guess from everyone's got an ego, Richard, some bigger than others. Will King Charles's ego be hurt? Will his confidence be knocked? Or do you think perhaps he saw this coming?
I think they take it in their stride. I mean, I was in Australia in, I think it was 2006 when the Queen went for the Commonwealth Games. If I may be wrong on those dates, but I think it was 2006. And the Queen was making a speech, and I think John Howard was Prime Minister at the time, if I remember rightly. And Mr. Howard gave an interview to the BBC where he said he didn't think now was the right time for Australia to become a monarchy, but when the reign changed would be time to discuss it. And the Queen was making a speech, and we were briefed by a senior royal aide that her speech was essentially going to say, you're a big grown-up democracy now, Australia. You don't need us necessarily if you don't want us. It's entirely up to you. Their line is always, well, it's a matter for the Australian people. But I genuinely think that it's not something that they lie awake worrying about at night. I think it's it's perhaps more of an issue for the British government, because while the Queen was head of state and while the King is head of state in all of these countries, then that link with Britain is very much front and centre, and British values can be portrayed in those other realms. But if King Charles III is no longer the monarch of some of those overseas realms, I think at the same time the UK would hope that it would maintain very close relations with those countries and still have a positive relationship. So which we've seen with Barbados. I think the UK will still be a close partner of Barbados.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. In time, I guess, Richard. Now, when we were on the other topic of early childhood, I actually forgot to bring up a poll, which you guys did vote in. So we'll bring up that poll for early childhood just to see. Do you think Princess of Wales's new campaign for early years is capturing the attention of the public and making a difference? Yes, 70%. No, nearly 30%. So there you go. Did you expect those kind of results, Richard?
Yeah, well, it's been given saturation coverage in the media, so I'm not surprised really. I particularly would, it's likely that people who took part in that poll are people who follow the royal family quite closely.
Yeah.
I think people are aware of it, but I think it's quite a complicated issue to get over. But I think what you can say is, and what has been said to us in the media is that she sees this as a sort of 5 to 10 year project, and it's about changing public perceptions, and then hoping that will filter into government policies, employers' policies, and other things. The way we pay people who work with children in their early years, for example. I think some of the practitioners in that field want to see it given greater status. Yeah. The problem is, of course, all of that requires, or a lot of it requires, extra public money, extra taxpayers' money, or council tax money to fund it. And at the same time, you have the governing party coming under pressure, not least from some newspapers, to cut taxes. So how do you square the circle there?
Yeah.
But they will point to, or they have pointed to, the mental health campaign that William, Kate, and Harry launched in 2016, Heads Together, that campaign. And I have to say, I've said this before publicly, I was really dubious about it, because it just seems that, and people are saying the same about this, it seems a little vague and a little wishy-washy, wanting to encourage a national conversation. For us in newspapers, we're used to launching a campaign that has a clearly defined goal that you can measure. That we are campaigning to get the law changed, or we are campaigning for the government to devote money to a particular issue. And this is a bit vaguer, but I was wrong back in 2016 when I sort of said, certainly on social media, I can't quite see the point of this, because it very much did change the public's view of the whole issue of mental health. Reducing stigma, and people now, employers now, I think, give a lot more, take a lot more account of employees who are saying, I'm suffering from mental health problems, than they might have done 10 years ago.
Yeah, this is true. There is a shift, isn't there? And obviously the Prince of Wales is very much backing his wife, very much there to support her at these events. Finally then, Richard, one final topic, which we will address briefly. Essentially, Harry and Meghan, they obviously across the US, it's all got a bit quiet now after the madness of the release of the book, especially from Meghan's side of things. There's not been lots of stories and stuff coming out, but obviously there's a massive support camp for them, which we do cover on the Royal Roundup, since they have actually stepped down. They also gave a big interview, didn't they, to Oprah, over a year ago now. It seems like yesterday, Richard. But yes, they gave a big interview, and they've got ever-changing relationships, obviously, with the royal family at home, and of course across the US, because they've got to be financially independent. Now, Oprah had a birthday party, invited lots of people there. It was pictured online, but we didn't see Harry and Meghan there. They might have been there, but they might not have been pictured. They obviously have a very ever-changing relationship with various people in society, Richard. From the UK side of things, is there any kind of reaction to any of their dealings with Hollywood, or is that just completely of no interest to the royal family now?
Well, I must admit, I've missed this story. and I don't really know what to make of it, other than, as you say, they might have been there and just not been photographed. I mean, this happened just before Christmas with the royal family's pre-Christmas gathering at Windsor. William and Kate weren't photographed with their children going to that because they already lived in the estate. I mean, I think it is interesting because they very much, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex very much were the darlings of the Hollywood elite when they first went over there. And I think a lot of people sort of on the liberal left, and particularly in the performing arts, bought into their account of being bullied, being the victims of, people thought racism, although they now say was racism from the British people, the British media, perhaps not from the British royal family. They sort of now say, and there's certainly still some who feel like that. But I think it's also true to say that a lot of people, certainly in the US media, but also in that sort of liberal elite, have become a little bit more circumspect about Harry and Meghan, and have got a little bit bored with the constant sort of victimhood narrative, the pity party, as some people have put it. So Maria McGrath says the states love Harry and Meghan. Well, there are. I don't think that's true. I mean, I think there are differing results from opinion polls, and whenever you quote an opinion poll, there's always some numpty who says, "Well, I wasn't asked about it." Well, who did they ask? Well, they ask professional polling companies ask a sample, a representative sample of people. They do come up with different views. It does still depend on who they speak to, obviously, but. I think their popularity has been damaged by their inability, apparently, to move on and just talk about something different. And that, I suppose, is because they have to keep relating back to the British royal family and their fractured relationship with it to appear relevant.
To keep them in the loop. Someone said Harry and Meghan should lead Britain. I'm not sure they'll be. Voted in this.
No. I mean, what we have seen in the States, I think we've discussed this before, is in general, but not always, a political divide that people who vote Democrat were more likely to be sympathetic to them, and people who vote Republican were less likely to be. Probably helped by Donald Trump being quite rude about them, for example. But I think that has changed, and certainly one opinion poll that was commissioned by Newsweek showed that even that they had lost a huge amount of popularity in the US, and I think William and Kate and the King and Queen Consort have also been a bit damaged by it, but not hugely. What those polls that particular poll also showed was that whereas before there's been a difference in ages, and you find this in the UK as well, that the older you are, the less sympathetic you're likely to be to Harry and Meghan. But the Newsweek poll showed that the 18 to 24 age group was in negative territory for them for the first time. So I found that really interesting. But then, of course, there'll be other polls that contradict that. So,
and then, of course, we've got to wait to find out whether they're here for the coronation. Any news on that, Richard?
No, I think there's no decision been taken yet. I guess they're going to have to make a decision soon about whether they invite them and then the Sussexes will have to decide whether they want to come or not. Yeah. My guess remains that they will invite them. It will be a little bit of a sideshow, but it will be a bit of a sideshow whether they come or not. There's been some reporting suggesting that the rest of the royal family are worried about them repeating private conversations if they do come. Well, I think they didn't have much time with other members of the family when they came back for Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee, and I can well envisage a situation where they come back. They come back to the UK, stay at Frogmore Cottage, go to the coronation, don't appear on the balcony, don't appear at any other events involving working members of the royal family, and then go back to the States. And that, to me, that seems the most likely scenario.
Yeah.
But who can say for sure at the moment?
No, well, I'm sure we'll be discussing it all when we do get news about such things. Richard, thank you for today. Insightful as ever. We'll be back again for the Royal Roundup next week on Thursday, dependent on Richard's schedule, of course. And as ever, you can catch up on all of our playlists now. We are on YouTube, so you can catch us on there. Obviously, our Facebook playlist, Instagram, you name it, we're on it. So you can catch up with all the episodes there of the latest on the Royal Roundup. Richard, thank you. And we'll be back next week.